Okay, next.
Coyote Song.
Okay. Have a good friend from college who was the best wide receiver that Darrell Royal ever had play for him, Reagan Janusa. And Reagan is a really interesting fellow. Coming out of high school, he was the #1 quarterback in the state of Texas. He was the #1 hurdler in the state of Texas. And he went to Texas, and from the time he was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, he just loved to draw. He would draw pictures all day long if it'd let him, and give him enough supplies to do it. And so he went to Texas to study art. He was going to play football too, and that's had his scholarship. And he needed the scholarship so he could continue his art education. And but he had about 3 or 4 knee surgeries when they didn't know how to fix him. And I mean, they really messed him up. But he still had his speed. He didn't have his mobility, so he wasn't going to make it as a quarterback anymore. And so Darrell was trying to get rid of him. And they just try to run kids like that off. It's not fair, and it's not right, and it's not just, especially after you've been injured. You've given your all, and so. But anyway, and so, so after his sophomore year, they didn't send him a playbook at the end of the year, and they didn't give him a regimen for working out over the year. They were just trying to ignore him and make him go away. And he finally begged to get a playbook and a workout schedule. And he said, "I've got to make." He says, "I think I can make this team as a defensive back because I have enough speed that I can keep up with the wide receivers but anyway, but he said they'll never give me a chance to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to volunteer because they're always looking for volunteers to be on the scout team. And as a scout team, you run the plays for the upcoming game against the next team you're playing." And so he volunteered as a receiver. And he says, "I'm going to do such a good job. I'm going to make the defensive backs look so bad that they're going to be begging for help. And then he says, I'll raise my hand and and they'll give me a chance to be on defense." And so anyway, so he's running scout teams and he's making the defense look bad. And they're supposed to play Tulane in New Orleans. And like history says, a hurricane was coming to New Orleans, so they had to move the game to Austin. And so one of the coaches came to Reagan and said, "Reagan, I want you to suit up tomorrow for the game against Tulane. And it'll be here in Austin. You can't come to the hotel because you weren't on the travel squad, but in the morning, just go down there and we'll have a jersey for you and want you to suit up." So anyway, Texas is supposed to just kill Tulane. And but they get next morning, and Reagan, all his athleticism was in his legs, which of course now impaired, but he didn't have much of an upper body, so he didn't look like a football player, And so he goes down there, and they won't let him in the stadium. He can't get in to get to the locker room to get his jersey. And finally, he begs somebody, and they phone up to the press box, and they send somebody down. They let him in, and he suits up. And lo and behold, about 4 minutes before the half, Tulane is ahead like 10-0. And all of a sudden, Royal screams at Janusa. He said, "Janusa, get over here." He says, "I ran over there. I didn't even take my helmet. I figured he's going to let me take the water in. They just called timeout." He says, "Get in there." He says, "Well, what position? I haven't played with the offense all year." He says, "Well, take so-and-so's place." Well, they gave him Ernie Coy's jersey, and Ernie Coy was like a 240-pound running back, and he was just massive up. I mean, this is like wearing his pajamas or something to put that on. Janusa, even with shoulder pads, didn't feel it. But anyway, he came in, and he went in for this wide receiver, and in those 4 minutes, he scored 2 touchdowns. Was that next door, or was it right here? I couldn't tell. Was it a gun, or was it just a... Oh, there it is, over there. See the splash up against the shore. Probably a big bass. And, but anyway, scored 2 touchdowns, and the rest is history. That summer, when they sent out the playbook for the next year, for the first time in Darrell Royal history, they had a wide receiver, and it was Reagan Janusa. And he got his scholarship. And I think if you can Google Reagan Janusa today, he's got his art studio outside of Dripping Springs, and I think he's the best wildlife artist maybe in the country right now. But in those days, kids played football so they could go to college, and today they go to college so they can play football. You know, and I think that's a crime. I don't mind them. I like them playing football, but I think it ought to be, the scholarship needs to be good till educated, because they don't want the kids to take real courses. I mean, they wouldn't tolerate somebody being an art student. They wouldn't tolerate somebody being, and all those players in my day, they were doctors, lawyers, veterinarians, bankers, brokers, whatever, because they made sure they got educated. And today they're really, to me, they shouldn't pay them, but they just got to give them some way they can support themselves the rest of their lives, and they don't do that. Next poem. Sorry about that.
No, don't be.
Did we record it?
Yeah.
Good. I like Reagan. He is just one of the nicest people. He sent me. Are we to? I want to be in Texas.
Yes, I'd like to be in Texas.
Yeah. So the Coyote Song. And so Reagan sent me these 2 YouTubes of the Coyote Song and I'd Like to Be in Texas. And having heard those songs, they clearly sounded like they could be about my great uncle, Hamilton Wilson. It had a ranch, a big ranch, on the divide west of Hunt, Texas. And I think it stretched 20 miles south of the divide and about 15 miles west of the divide all the way over to Rio Frio. And back in the 1890s, they had outlaws coming in to try to steal the ranch from all the time. Over the years, he got bit by rattlesnakes a number of times, and he says they don't kill you, they just hurt you real bad. Well, I bet they do. And a funny story on that is that they didn't have a highway going from the divide into Kerrville, where the closest doctor was. And so you just followed the ranch roads from one ranch to the other, going through all the gates and the cross fencing and all that stuff. And Anna Laura, his wife, who was my paternal grandmother's favorite cousin, called into the doctor in Kerrville and said, well, Hamilton did it again, you know, I'm bringing him in. And because apparently it's just horribly painful. And so when she drove him in, there was somebody at every gate on every ranch all the way to Kerrville, because back then they had a party line. And when anybody made a call out or made a call in, it dinged on everybody else's phone. And so when she phoned in, everybody was listening. And so they were all out from it. He fought in the First World War. He rode with the Texas Rangers down in the Chihuahua Desert trying to catch Pancho Villa, and never did catch that rascal, but he was always up shopping horses off Hamilton's place. And coming home from the First World War, he stopped off in San Antonio and met Anna Laura and fell in love, got back to the ranch, and after a couple of months, his dad says, son, I haven't gotten an honest day's work out of you since you left the lady. He says, go back to San Antonio, get the gal, get hitched, get your butt back out here, because you just been worthless since you left her. So anyway, he got on his horse and he rode back to San Antonio, and he told Anna Laura what was up, and that, not very romantic, that you got to marry me so I can get some work done. You know, that didn't turn her on, but she says, well, what makes you think I'm going to marry you? You've been gone a long time. I'm engaged to somebody else. He says, well, that's okay. You want to marry me before I kill him or after I kill him? She says, oh, well, and she's the one that tells me the story. So she says, well, the killing won't be necessary. So they got hitched, and they put her on a buckboard, and they followed the creeks and gullies back out to the divide, and they lived many, many years, had a great, great life together. I think that's all you Anyway, he was my sole source for pet. I always had pet raccoons growing up, and so he was my sole source. That's where I got my raccoons, and from Hamilton Wilson, the poem. One second. So, Hamilton Wilson was the cowboy I knew in South Texas. His face was burned deep by the sun, part history, part sage, part mesquite. He was there when Pancho Villa was young. And he'd tell you a tale of the old days when the country was wild all around. Then sit under the stars of the Milky Way and listen to the coyotes howl. And they'd go, oh, yip, 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 yip. And he'd talk about the Longhorns and Drovers, the Apache, Comanche, Cherokee. He'd tell you about the Buffalo Lion and the Red Wolf and all the outlaws, bandits, and thieves. Then he'd curse all the roads and the old men. He even cursed the automobile. He said there ain't no place for an hombre like I am in this new world of asphalt and steel. 'Cause the Longhorns and Drovers are gone, just like Geronimo, Quanah Parker, and Stanway T. Gone like the Buffalo Lion and the Red Wolf. Disappeared like Sam Bass, Pancho, and Lefty. Then he'd look off into the distance at something only he could see, and he'd say, all that's left now of the old days is a damned old coyotes and me. And they'd go, oh, yip, 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 yip. Well, one morning they searched his adobe. He disappeared without even a word, just vanished like the Buffalo Lion and the Red Wolf and the last of the buffalo herds. But that night, as the moon crossed the mountain, something mystical, magical occurred, just as the moonbeams kissed the rim rock. The last of the two-legged coyotes was heard, and he went, oh, yip, 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 yip. But gone does not mean he's forgotten. He'll live on in our Texas history, along with Houston, Austin, and Travis, the Alamos, San Jacinto, the Caninos, and the Yellow Rose named Emily. Gone but not forgotten, he'll live on for an eternity in the hearts of all good Texans, Texans like you and me.